Video belonged to the channel from the eyes of a pilot, and only the cabin crew owned ALM Airlines. The DC-9 plane was cruising over the Atlantic Ocean. The name of the captain pilot sitting in the left seat of the flight was Bolcha. The 37-year-old captain pilot had a total of 12,000 passengers. He had hours of flight experience. The name of the 25-year-old co-pilot sitting in the right seat was Harry. The co-pilot had 3,500 hours of flight experience. When we look at the flight hours of the pilots, we can easily say that both pilots were very experienced. In addition, sitting in the cockpit was a flight engineer named who was in the cockpit in old times but is not found in most of today's aircraft. The flight engineer was 35 years old. A total of 57 passengers and 6 flight crew, along with 63 people, were carrying out this flight. Coming back to the flight, the plane with flight number 980 was rapidly approaching the Princess Juliana Airport on the island of San Martin. At 14:25, the air traffic controller contacted the plane and said that the conditions of the plane were not suitable. He stated that the limits were not suitable for landing. As a result, the captain asked permission from the tower officer to change the airport on his route and return to another airport, San Juan. Shortly after, the tower officer reconnected and said that the weather conditions had improved sufficiently at the Princess Juliana Airport in San Martin, which they were approaching, and that the weather conditions had improved enough for landing. He told the pilots that the expected cloud cover would be 1 foot and 5,000, and that the visibility was 5 kilometers. Thereupon, the pilots requested to work at 10,000 feet to go to San Martin again at 1450. The captain noted that they had approximately 2,600 kilograms of fuel at this point. And Princess Juliana wrote that they will have 2,000 kilograms of fuel left when they arrive at the airport where they will go. Let's take a short break from the video. We work for hours, even days, to prepare the videos. In return for our efforts, you can help us stand out by simply liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Now let's go back to the accident that happened, 6,000 fuel to the DC-9 plane with flight number 980. They were given permission to land at, and the air traffic controller said that they were free to approach Juliana Airport. After a short time, the plane continued its descent and descended to 2,500 feet, and at this altitude, they started to fly straight and maintain their altitude. Meanwhile, the weather update came and said that the cloud base was decreasing at 800 feet and at 5,000 feet. They said that there was clouding at 100 feet and the visibility was 5 kilometers. At this point, the pilots saw the runway too late due to the adverse weather conditions. They decided to go around the plane, which was unsuitable for landing, by entering missed approach commands. After passing the runway, the pilots turned left and attempted to land again with a left-hand approach to land again. At 15 to 20 o'clock, the flight crew started a second landing attempt again, but in this landing attempt, due to the adverse weather conditions, they could not see the runway and did not recognize it on the runway. This landing attempt also failed. The pilot passed by and decided to make a left turn for a third landing attempt. In both of these landing attempts, the plane opened its flats and tried to land with a 25-degree flap angle. Additionally, the plane's landing gear was open and they were circling the airfield at a speed of 140 knots. In the 3-inch attempts, the captain wanted the flaps to be fully open and started to descend by reducing the airspeed even more in this last attempt. The captain finally succeeded in aligning with the runway. However, this time the descent rate was insufficient. Even though they were aligned horizontally with the runway, they had to go around again because their vertical distance was not suitable. At the end of 3 go-arounds, the captain pilot considered returning to the airport where they initially planned to return, but left for another airport nearby. Thinking that their low fuel and weather conditions would be more suitable, they decided to land at the airport on the island called St. Thomas. They found a gap to land at this airport and asked traffic control for landing permission. Knowing that they were low on fuel, the tower officer immediately asked the pilots to climb to 4,000 feet and land on St. Thomas. He directed the pilots, Meanwhile, the pilots noticed an inconsistency between the fuel indicators and the amount of fuel they calculated. Although the captain pilot predicted that there might be a malfunction in the fuel indicators, he evaluated the worst-case scenario and decided to descend to establish visual contact with the water in case of landing on water. Shortly after, the captain pilot air traffic. He said that they may have to lower the plane into the water by connecting to the controls and that they are currently descending towards the water in order to make visual contact with the water. The captain pilot also warned the cabin chief and said that they had low fuel, so he told the passengers in the cabin to put them in a suitable position for diving into the water. The cabin chief quickly warned the passengers. No warning was made, and the aircraft's equipment, which was announced in the cabin, was not working. The captain pilot eyed the water and made a firm decision to land, stating his decision to his assistant. He started the plane in level flight at 500 feet and tried to choose the appropriate angle of diving into the water. You can think about what a suitable angle could be, called Sybil on the water surface. There are wind-induced fluctuations. Landing on water according to the appropriate wide angle of the wave causes an increase in the possibility of the plane remaining on the surface of the water rather than being directly buried in the water. For this reason, pilots plan to land on water with the technique called cyber system in such emergency situations. The captain pilot was descending to give floating feet after giving 100 feet. Then, checking his complement, he opened another 100 feet and slowly approached the water. The captain's 12,000 hours of flight experience. Maybe it would come into play in this emergency. While the captain was playing red, he focused on the waves on the surface of the water, varying between 3 and 5 meters, and instead of going into the wave, he used the Sybil method. Knowing that he had to land on the wave, he carefully chose the appropriate position. Otherwise, the plane could have crashed into the water and broken into pieces. 5 meters before the water surface, the flyer turned his flaps to 15 degrees and allowed the airspeed of the plane to decrease. At this point, low fuel pressure warning lights started to light up in the cockpit, and the captain brought the flaps to full position for a short time. After a while, the rotation of the engines stopped due to the fuel in the plane running out. After the engines stopped, the plane continued to run at 90.6. There was almost 2 meters left for the fuselage to touch the water. The pilot was floating among the waves, keeping the nose of the plane up. And finally, the ALM Airlines Darkness DC-9 plane with flight number 980 was 30 miles, approximately 48, to the airport they were going to. It crashed in an area on the Caribbean Sea, kilometers away. 23 of the 63 people on the plane died as a result of the incident, and 37 of the 40 people were injured. The captain who made the landing managed to land the plane in one piece, thus saving the lives of at least 40 people. As if the plane crash was not enough, the plane crashed. There were many sharks in the area. The survivors started to wait with life jackets on in the wavy and shark-filled sea until the rescue team arrived. The struggle for survival for the survivors had begun. The United States security units joined the U.S. Navy Marines in the rescue efforts. Helicopter rescue for some passengers among the survivors. The rescue of the survivors by helicopter started half an hour after the landing, and the last person rescued from the plane, the captain pilot, was taken out of the sea exactly 1 hour after landing. As for the wreckage of the plane, it remained in one piece after landing on the water, but the plane that sank after the accident went down to a depth of 1,500 meters in the sea. It was buried. That's why the wreckage could not be raised to sea level. The investigation of the accident was carried out by the United States National Transportation Safety Board. The investigators who carried out the investigation determined that while the plane was about to land on the water, the passengers in the cabin were not given sufficient information about landing and seatbelts. Although the exact number is not known, the plane landed on the water. Before the landing, some of the passengers were not wearing their seatbelts. In fact, some passengers were standing because they did not know that they would land in the water. If all the passengers had been informed adequately for the landing, perhaps the number of casualties would have been much lower. In the conclusion of the accident, the reason for the accident was the poor fuel management in the aircraft as a result of the pilots being affected by the adverse weather conditions and acting carelessly. It was written that what they had done was the wrong fuel calculation and misreading of the fuel gauges after they passed 3 times, which were the main reasons for diving into the water. In the report written after the accident, it was suggested that the old safety system used at that time should be changed and a modern design should be made. In addition, the pilot's checklist for emergency landings included passengers as an item. It was written that the phrase "warning" should be added in memory of the 40 passengers who fought for their lives against sharks in the Caribbean after the accident and the 23 people who lost their lives in the accident.